Hello, folks. Welcome to the Before Yesterday We Could Fly virtual meetup for February 5th, 2022. We'll get started here soon, but we welcome folks who are watching us on YouTube, Facebook, or Twitter. We will be getting started in a few minutes here. This is a virtual meetup for editing content in Wikipedia and Wikidata around the new Afrofuturist Period Room at the Met. So as we get started, depending on what platform you're watching on, you will be able to send comments and we will be able to show them on screen. So tell us where you're watching from if you're on Twitter, Facebook, or YouTube. If you're on Twitter and YouTube, we will see your name and thumbnail image, which is great. If you're on Facebook, you may need to authenticate yourself so that we get to see your name and not just a generic label. So if you go to streamyard.com/Facebook, you can actually go ahead and add your authentication or approval to be brought up on screen. So for Facebook users, go to streamyard.com/Facebook to authorize your name and face to be shown on screen. So we'll get started very soon, but please feel free to tell us where you're watching from. We know we have an international audience for this, and this is going to be a very unique edit-a-thon where we are editing a whole bunch of different artists and artworks, and we're really excited to get started here soon. All right, great to see folks from all over, from Brazil, from Amsterdam. Welcome. And folks from Manhattan. In the meantime, if you want, you can go to the Meetup page, which you can find on Wikipedia. Actually, what we'll do is we'll show you an example of how to get to that page. If you go to periodroom.org, Richard, I think that'll get you there. Is that right?
Yeah, that'll get you to the Meetup page. And if you want to enroll and on the dashboard and make it, maybe if you don't have a Wikipedia account already, you can go to enroll.periodroom.org. And you can, if you don't have a Wikipedia name, you can just pick one. It doesn't have to be your name. It can be just something something fun.
Great. So we'll get started here soon. But welcome folks watching on Twitter, YouTube, Facebook. Again, if you're a Facebook user, you'll need to go to streamyard.com/Facebook to authorize your name and your thumbnail image to be seen on screen. But do tell us where you're watching from around the world. We'll get started here soon. Right, and make sure if you want to go to periodroom.org for those folks just joining us. We also have a chat on Discord if you want to go there, chat.periodroom.org. Or if you want to enroll in the Period Room edit-a-thon, you can go to enroll.periodroom.org there. But this is the most easy way to get to the content. So we'll get started here in a minute or so. All right, welcome folks coming from YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. We'll get started in a second here. All right, we have a good question here. What is Afrofuturism? And I'm sure we will be addressing that in the presentations from our curators from the Met. All right, so let's get started soon. feel free to tell us where you're watching from in the comments, and we can bring them up on screen. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Afrofuturist Wiki Edit-a-thon at the Met Museum. My name is Andrew Lee. I'm the Wikimedia strategist with the Metropolitan Museum of Art. We're so glad to have you here today. We're going to introduce you to some folks that will help lead us through today's events. First, I want to introduce Richard. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi, I'm Richard Nipel, user Pharos on Wikipedia and the other Wikimedia projects. I do some work with the Met as a Wikipedian residence, and I'm also coming to you from Wikimedia New York City, or your local wiki chapter.
Great, thanks, Richard. And we also have Jeannie Choi from the Met.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jeannie Choi. I work in the digital department at the Met, and I've worked with Andrew and Richard on many edit-a-thons. So, also joined by two of my colleagues at the Met.
Great. Ian.
Hi, everybody. I'm Ian Altavere. I'm the Aaron I. Fleischman Curator of Modern and Contemporary Art at the Met, and I'm one of the in-house co-curators of Before Yesterday We Could Fly, the Afrofuturist Period Room, which opened to the public in early November 2021 and which continues to be on view. And alongside me here is another wonderful colleague who worked on the show with me.
Hi, everyone.
Hi, Anna Matisse.
Hi, my name is Anna Matisse Donafer Hickey. I'm a research associate in the Department of European Sculpture and Decorative Arts, and I was the research associate on this project with Ian and the other curators.
Great, thank you. Eliza.
Hi, good morning or good afternoon. I am Eliza Myrie. I'm the Wikipedia director for Black, a user group dedicated to kind of closing some knowledge gaps around Black artists, particularly on Wikipedia and their images on Wiki Commons. And I'm really excited to edit and talk with you all this morning.
Great, thank you. And we have Sherry. Oh, Sherry, you're muted.
Hi, my name is Sherry Antwine. I'm the director of AfroCrowd, which is a Wikimedia user group and as well as a group in general that focuses on engagement and knowledge and awareness of people of African descent on Wikipedia and in Wikimedia. So that means not only the information you read, but also the editing and contributions of that information as well.
Great, thank you, everyone. We've got a great team here today, and we're going to walk you through some of the things about the exhibit, but also how we can start to move some of that information and model some of those things on Wikipedia, Wikidata, and Wikimedia Commons. So don't worry if this is not all something you understand yet. We're going to walk you through some of the basics on how to engage with Wikipedia and to improve the content there. So first off, I wanted to make sure that we let everyone know that if you're watching on YouTube, Facebook, or Twitter, you can actually send comments to us and we can actually bring up comments on screen. So feel free to send your questions or your comments and we can bring up selected versions of those on screen here. If you're on Facebook, you may need to go to streamyard.com/Facebook to actually authenticate yourself. So that's something that you can do if you want your face and your name to show up when you have these comments on screen. So we welcome you to do that. We will also be walking you through some of the basics on how to create an account on Wikipedia and give you some advice on how to create their usernames. But in the meantime, if you want to do that, you can try that by going to the event page. And maybe, Richard, you can show us where the event page is here. But the easiest way, perhaps, we've made some shortcuts for you, is just to go to periodroom.org, which should get you to the Wikipedia Meetup page for this event. And almost everything we'll be working on is there at that wiki page. And we'll show you that in a little bit. There's also a chat going on as well. So there is a chat here for this session in either YouTube or Facebook or wherever you're watching, but there is also a Discord chat specifically for this event. So if you're a user of Discord, you can go to chat.periodroom.org and go and see that. We also encourage you for social media assets to use the hashtag which is right there, Afrofuturist, and to use that in any kind of social media that you're sending out there to advertise this event. So we're so happy to have you all here. So first, we're going to hear from Ian and Anna Matisse, and then we'll hear from Eliza and Sherry later on. So one of the really amazing things about this exhibit is being able to see it in person, but we know not everyone can get there right now. But I think the next best thing is having Ian and Anna tell us more about the room. So I'm going to give you the floor right now and have you talk us through some of the amazing things that you folks did in the process of creating this exhibit. So let me go ahead and give you the floor to talk about the exhibit.
Thank you so much. Thanks everyone again for joining us this morning or this afternoon. And Anna Matisse and I are really thrilled to be here to tell you a little bit more about the background of this period room. The exhibition is called Before Yesterday We Could Fly, an Afrofuturist period room. It's a project we've been working on for more than 2 years now at the museum. And of course, this is, and the next slide will show a little bit about what that space looks like. It is, in a way, partly based on real period rooms that are at the Met. You're looking at it here from the north end of the gallery. It's a space right in the middle of the museum, on the museum's main floor, at a juncture between European sculpture and decorative arts galleries that deal with 18th century Venetian decorative arts, the end of the British galleries, the 19th century Britain and the United Kingdom, and right at the entrance to the Met's American wing. From the other side of the room, here you're seeing the futuristic living room. The other side of the room will show you into the kind of maybe past or present kitchen space of the room. And as I mentioned, the museum is full of other period rooms, maybe more than 40 of them. And here I'm showing you a room from an 18th century, or yeah, it's an 18th century mansion in Bordeaux, France, that is not that far away from the Afrofuturist period room. In this space, you can see a kind of the end or the morning after, perhaps, of a special drinks and gaming party. And it's one of our favorite rooms and one of the models we thought about when we were thinking about the Afrofuturist period room, because it looks so lived in, because it's so dressed with other decorative arts, looks, and Anna Matisse will speak more to this kind of legacy of period rooms at the Met in a little bit. But I think when we were approached originally by the museum's director, Max Hollein, a number of years ago, to think about a period room of the present or the future, it was, I admit, a rather mystifying brief at first. As someone who works mainly with living artists, mainly in painting and sculpture and drawings, and perhaps time-based media installations, I had an idea of what period rooms were and what they did, but I never really put one together. And I always thought, of course, that they were deeply steeped in the past, right? That they represented spaces that evoked a very distinct and perhaps very specific moment in time. And so what would it mean then to make a room that was about a different time than the past, about a present that we're living in now, perhaps, or a future that may not yet exist? And doing brainstorming around this was really fascinating and complicated. I, as a child, often loved going through period rooms and imagined myself living in them. But to think about what a period room of today might be in a context in a museum where so many of those period rooms are about a kind of white aristocratic class, right? Whether it's Marie Antoinette's writing desk or whether it's a Dutch colonialist kitchen from 17th century New York. All of those rooms in general, except for very few exceptions in the museum, look at the kind of European or white American legacy. And so what would it mean to represent a space that belonged, in a sense, to somebody very different? Finally, I was in Anna Matisse and my colleague, Sarah Lawrence, who's another co-curator on this show, in her office one day. And she said, okay, what if it's not, you know, a wealthy white person who lives on Park Avenue's living space? What if it is, say, a music mogul's room? And of course, that put a light bulb in my head, right? And the idea that there are folks we know in real life, and I'm showing you here in this slide on the left, a really nice image from a birthday party for P. Diddy, where he is here together with some of his other, amazing stars of music. And they stand in front of a work, which I'll talk about shortly, by Kerry James Marshall, something he had just purchased not that long before for a great sum of money. It's a painting, by the way, that had been recently with us at the Met in a retrospective for Kerry James Marshall at the Met Breuer in 2016. So we know examples in real life of people of color collecting work and creating spaces that speak to their own lived experience and speak to Black excellence and beauty and power. We also know examples from fiction, and I'm thinking in particular of the TV show Empire, and I'm showing you a slide on the right. And here you see Taraji P. Henson, who plays the wife, or maybe erstwhile wife, of a hip hop music label's owner. And here you see her with, I think, her sister on the show, in front of a beautiful picture by the New York-based artist, Toyin Oluibe. So we know examples on TV, for example, where that represents this kind of certain style of living and collecting works of art that center Black experience, Black beauty, Black joy, Black pleasure. The next slide is a closer up version of this wonderful picture by Kerry James Marshall called Pastimes, painted in 1997, and crowns a moment in the 1990s when this artist was thinking about how to represent Black lived experience, Black pleasure. And you see folks disporting themselves on the banks of a lake, right? Perhaps most likely Chicago, where the artist lives and works, playing golf, having a picnic, listening to music, water skiing, and that these images of a life well lived, a life affluently lived, are so difficult in a way to find, particularly in the medium of painting and on a grand scale like that of the European Old Masters. And that in the 90s was particularly Kerry James Marshall's project. And so it's sort of no accident in a way that someone with great wealth, like P. Diddy, might be interested in acquiring a work like this, which represents that kind of leisure activity, right? That kind of a life well lived, and a life that's centered with images of joy and beauty and excellence. And so in a way, this was an immediate inspiration for us to think about representing a life in a period room that is not particularly Eurocentric in mind, right? But that represents work that centers Black excellence. Kerry James Marshall is also known, of course, for doing graphic novels and for a practice that's deeply steeped in comic books and that kind of story, and that kind of even science fiction type storytelling. And what in a way connects so many of the artists that are collected both in fiction and in real life in this mode is a mode of Afrofuturism. And pretty quickly we realized that for us at the Met, that this was not necessarily our story to tell. If we were going to think about a room that centered Afrofuturist creativity, one that thinks of spaces beyond the kind of confines of white supremacy, for example, and that centers Black excellence and Black forward thinking, that we needed some real major collaborators on this. And the slides, that also we had an opportunity here, and I'll show you in the next slide, I think, an opportunity to tell a story of a history that the Met also had yet to address, that of Seneca Village, the 19th century Black settlement that existed just a few hundred yards west of the museum's current address, from the 1820s to the 1850s until it was destroyed through, the land was seized through eminent domain, and the village destroyed in order to make way for New York's Central Park and for a different kind of population altogether than the one that was thriving and growing there. And so in order to tell that story and the story of Afrofuturism in a really creative way, we went to two extraordinary collaborators who we're going to spotlight in this very short video clip that we'll show now.
Seneca Village was an important community that was established in the 1820s in what is now Central Park. This was a very interesting time in America where you did see the abolition of slavery in New York State, but you still had the threat of slavery. And so I think Seneca Village would have presented for African American people a place that was kind of a safe haven. And it would have just been a quieter kind of existence where they probably felt that they could breathe. In the 1850s, the city of New York decided that they wanted to have more green space for public use. Unfortunately, it was Seneca Village, along with a number of other communities, that were destroyed through the use of eminent domain to make this land available for the public. They were given paltry amounts of money in exchange for their land, and Seneca Village for a very long time was forgotten. An archaeological dig around a decade ago uncovered a lot of what we know now about the peoples who live there. And so what we've tried to do in this project is imagine these spaces for their historical moment in the 19th century, but also in ways that inform and speak to our present moment and into the future.
Some type of structure that sort of spoke to Seneca Village is where we wanted to start. And nobody really knew what it looked like. So that kind of gave us a lot of leeway to take liberties with how this structure would look. And I based a lot of that on late 19th century Black communities, what people could build with in Black communities at that time, as well as slave cabins. I'm from New Orleans, so I see that a lot. So we knew this structure, what it kind of wanted to be, doing the research, looking at the details of the materials and the cladding. We have windows that are low, windows that are high, just little peekaboos, right? Because as a Black American, your perspective of your past is but a window, because nobody really knows. So much language was taken, so much of our tradition. So, we're the lost tribe. My look into the past is a window. Visitors that come through will have that same experience that most Black people in this country have with their past. And then the living room, it is in its essence very futuristic.
A creative mode. It's a concept that's always changing, but it's one that's about the liberation of people of African descent. And it's all about the idea of a kind of differing existence from what we're living right now. It's about imagining a place where one can truly be free. I hope that for the public, and especially new generations of young Black children, that they're able to see the value in going into the past, in the archive, but also that they see the possibilities that speculation, that Afrofuturism can really bring to people at large. There was hope at Seneca Village, and I think that this continuous kind of idea of building community, of thinking speculatively, is liberating as well.
So you just heard from our amazing co-curators on this show, lead curator Hannah Beekler, who is the Oscar-winning set designer and production designer, and Michelle Commander, who's associate director, curator of Lapidus Center at the Schomburg Center for Research in Black Culture at New York Public Library. And now Anna Matisse is going to speak a little bit more about period rooms in general, but I hope that furnished a bit of an idea of what Afrofuturism could be and how it could center a reconsideration of these rooms.
Thank you so much, Ian. So as is evident from the exhibition subtitle, Before Yesterday We Could Fly, a period room, but it's one that pushes the boundaries of what a period room can do. It's not the first reconsideration of this type of display that the museum has mounted, but it does consciously disrupt its conventions in ways that haven't really been explored at the Met until now. So most traditional period rooms, particularly as they appear at the Met and in my department in particular, though also prominently in the American wing, are a curatorial mode of display in which an interior from a particular time and place is displayed as a record of that past, usually in order to holistically demonstrate the general style of the period. Large parts of a room's furnishings might be drawn from the same previous context. For example, the wall panels of this room that Ian showed earlier all came from the same 18th century French mansion. However, when displayed in museums, these elements are usually augmented with contiguous works from the collection and even with non-accessioned prop objects, such as the cards, napkins, logs in the fireplace, and the tablecloth in this example. Selected by curators and carefully lit, these elements together not only create a distinct interior space, they depict it at a particular fictional moment in time, in the Bordeaux room here in the early morning after a late night card game, and they invite the viewer to imagine themselves within it. At the same time, however, this pastiche means that period rooms depend on this fiction or imagining, deeply researched and well considered, but ultimately a combination of objects that historically were never actually in the same place at the same time, despite how much the display might convince visitors otherwise. The period room persuades the audience of its authenticity by rendering the curator's hand invisible in the creation of these moments in a seemingly lived-in space. So one of the period rooms that Ian mentioned earlier, the Segreto Bedroom, is in the gallery just adjacent to Before Yesterday, and it's comprised of 18th century stucco sculptures, pine-paneled walls, an inlaid floor, a bed, and a painted ceiling from the Venetian Segreto Palace. These pieces form a bedroom and an anteroom, though in the palace they were also joined by a dressing room, which the museum did not purchase. So already we are missing sort of part of the original context in this display. And this was one of the earliest acquisitions of period room elements by an American museum, and it was purchased in 1906. So this timing is significant because it was in the early 20th century that period rooms, as I have been describing them, first started to appear as a curatorial mode. It was the era of paternalism as well, when part of the Met's mission was, quote, for furnishing popular instruction, end quote. And like many other museums, the group of prominent Americans that founded the Met and our early collections did so in part because they sought to instill good taste in the general public by dictating through display which aesthetics and lifestyles to aspire to. So most of the Met's period rooms, excepting, as Ian mentioned, the Damascus Room and the Astor Court, not only represent a particular moment in time, they also represent the lifestyles of a particular group of people, that is, wealthy white Europeans and Americans. For example, most of the 17th century Swiss room, which is aesthetically my favorite period room in our collection, was sold from the Schlüssli, or the Little Castle in Flims, Switzerland. It was originally bequeathed to the Kunstgewerbe Museum, but that institution offered it to the Met because they already had two rooms in this Baroque style, but also because this style was unfashionable in Europe at the turn of the 20th century, but deemed appropriate for display in America, where, without access to European heritage sites, it was thought that visitors might benefit even from passé examples of European interiors, right? So the Swiss room evokes a castle, the Segreto a palace, and the Bordeaux room a mansion. So I think their recreation in the context of an encyclopedic museum like the Met at the turn of the 20th century demonstrates how this kind of carefully constructed white Eurocentric interior design demonstrated within them was being upheld as an ideal of interior decoration and lifestyle. So Before Yesterday intentionally disrupts all of these aspects of the period room as a curatorial mode. Instead of camouflaging the curator's hand to create a fiction of authenticity, the project embraces this fiction, viewing it as an opportunity for speculative storytelling informed by careful research. We leaned into the period room's fictional representation of a particular moment in time to invite an imagining led by Hannah of a different mode of living into the museum, an Afrofuturist one that deeply questions the very Eurocentric idea that time can be fixed at a particular moment at all. And as I think Ian got to earlier, with the mention of Seneca Village, and as Michelle and Hannah explained a little bit more in the clip, this project also vehemently rejects the limitation of the Met's period rooms to white Eurocentric interiors, and instead looks to domestic lives previously omitted from the scope of the museum's period displays, hence the turn to Seneca Village, because even though the story of that community has not been acknowledged in the Met's galleries, it flourished close to the museum's site, and it also flourished less than 50 years before the museum acquired its first period room. So by embracing the paradox of the period room, its simultaneous fiction and plausible authenticity, Before Yesterday explores a future that can only be imagined, extrapolated from a past that was largely erased by the machinations of white supremacy. And that intent is evident in the great diversity of objects by Black artists that are on display in the room, and which we will be working towards during this this wiki edit-a-thon. Oh, Andrew, I think you're muted.
Sorry about that. Thank you so much, Anna Matisse and Ian. It's been so great to have this context for the exhibit. And for those who've had the fortune of seeing it in person, it's just such a rich explanation for what you see there in person. So we're going to try to give as much as possible in this virtual edit-a-thon a feel for what it means to be there. And we have the video online that I'm sure you folks had a hand in making on YouTube, which is just incredible to walk through all those different parts. And later on, we'll talk about how we actually have indexes into all little bits of that video if you want to deep dive into specific artifacts and write about particular artists, which is just a great resource to have. So thank you so much for all that. I think we will next go to Eliza and tell us a little bit about the editing of Wikipedia articles and the rich experience that you have, Eliza, with Black Lunch Table, which is an incredible project that engages the African-American community in trying to improve articles around Wikipedia. So Eliza, I'm going to hand it to you.
Thank you. And Ian and Anna Matisse, thank you so much for sharing all that context. I think it's really great to kind of draw a parallel between Seneca Village and the acknowledgement of a really vast, lively community of people that were living and existing. And in today's, institutionalized version of some of what we talk about, they're not recognized as maybe they should be. And I think this is something that Black Lunch Table really was founded on, and is something that we began with and is central to our Wikipedia project in addressing what are known as knowledge gaps. So the importance of the artists in this show being included on Wikipedia as a central space that we go to for knowledge, resource, information about anything that, anyone with a smartphone or computer is like, who is this or what is that, right? Like, we need to know that those things are there and represented. The Met should have some acknowledgement of what was nearby before as like a comprehensive institution of cultural knowledge. So I think that's just really something that we can all hold in our mind as we start to think about why we edit Wikipedia, or what needs to be maybe given a little more attention as we're kind of building out knowledge and resources together in the future. So thank you again, both, and of course to Hannah and Michelle, who can't be with us, but were with us by video today. So what I kind of want to do for these next, 15 or 20 minutes is remind everyone, of course, to get a username if you don't have a username on Wikipedia. It's a pretty simple thing to do. And I know Andrew is putting up various where to do this, how to find it kind of things. So give yourself a username, anonymize it. It shouldn't be like your name and your birthday linking you to your email. You do kind of want to keep some distance from who you are in the real world, just for good practice. So just to begin with Black Lunch Table, We are about a 17-year-old organization, and our wiki project, I think, is about 7 years old now, if I'm getting it right. And largely our focus is through the Wikipedia project and through our archives and artist table project is the production of discursive sites, where the people, right, all of us, not just Black people, not just white people, all the people, engage in critical dialogue with one another about the topics that affect our communities. You know, we all live in these communities together. It is also important to mobilize a democratized rewriting of this history. By pointing to Seneca Village, those people didn't get to speak about their existence, right? So we, in this moment, hope to help folks through Wikipedia editing and through other archival projects tell their stories now. And it's really central to what we think about with artists on Wikipedia. The project was founded by artists. Most of us who work on the project are visual artists. So this is, of course, really special to us to get to edit about and work with everyone on this project today. And I think it's important to point out about the demographics of Wikipedia and what Wikipedia is as a space. If you don't know, or have only ever really been on the kind of read-only side, Wikipedia is a completely volunteer-based space. That means that if you have some extra time, you have knowledge about something, or you're willing to research something, you are empowered to become an editor and add information to Wikipedia that we all rely on, we all search. How tall is Michael Jordan? You know, whatever the case may be. But there's a reality behind that about who gets to have free time, whose knowledge is valued, you know, all these kind of different relations that we have in society. And one of the ways that this shows up on Wikipedia and that we have to kind of address and hold a little at the forefront is that of those editors, which, you know, I think the number is hovering around 200,000, and Richard and Andrew, please correct me if that number's wrong, but I think active editors is about 200,000 people on English Wiki. And what we need to acknowledge is that 84% of those editors are male, and 77% of those editors are white, and these are self-identified numbers. And that means, of course, that the knowledge that these people have is potentially what is mostly represented on the encyclopedia. It doesn't mean that it's bad knowledge. It doesn't mean that they're bad. It just means that there is a bias towards the expertise that these people have, which means that expertise that these people don't have is really, 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 really left out. And on Wikipedia, what we call these are knowledge gaps. They exist as it relates to language. They exist as it relates to subject. They exist as it relates to gender, right? There are a variety of different kinds of knowledge gaps. And I just, a new poll recently came out that just shows of the percent, well, I'm not gonna like get into the numbers of this, but basically Black and African-American people are underrepresented as editors in relation to their population in the United States. And white or Caucasian people are overrepresented as it relates to their population in the United States. So again, more reasons to kind of be particular about the topics that we edit on and work together to close these kind of knowledge gaps. So again, crowdsourced encyclopedia, I have 125 editors here, kind of comes and goes over time. And there are, you know, 800 million unique pages of views a month, which means that give or take 200,000 people are writing that content. That's a really big power dynamic, and everyone, and I just want to stress literally everyone, should feel empowered to contribute. You, as whoever you are empowered to be an editor, and it's really important. Everyone has expertise to share. Everyone can learn the basics of wiki code and contribute, right? So something special that you might know and can find a reference for can be added to Wikipedia and enrich the lives and knowledge of others. So just briefly, before we kind of do a quick tour around on Wiki about some of the artists in from the period room, I just want to remind everyone of the 5 pillars of Wikipedia. Now that I've said that it is a volunteer-based and community-based editing project, you just need to remember these kind of 5 standards when you're editing and when you're entering into not the read space, but the editor space of Wikipedia. Like I said, it's an encyclopedia. This is not a place for subjective opinions or like my dad is the best guy there ever was, right? It's an encyclopedia. It's a place people go for information and knowledge. Wikipedia should always be written from a neutral point of view. Again, nothing subjective. We're keeping objective, referenceable, verifiable information as the contributions that we're making on any given page, whether that's in your Wikidata editing, in your Wikipedia editing, and you're following rules for other platforms like Wikicommons and being appropriate with licenses and copyright. Copyright's a big deal. I'll make a comment about that in a second. We have to remember that Wikipedia is free content for anyone and everyone. I think a lot of us have probably referenced it for writing a paper or, a trivia game that we're playing or finding something out that we were wondering about. And we trust Wikipedia to be true, right? And part of that is that it can be brought from any reference into Wikipedia, but we have to do a special kind of step from that source. And that step is that you kind of paraphrase, you change, you can't pull the exact sentence that a researcher published in their journal and put it into Wikipedia. Again, this is about copyright and licenses. So as an editor, what you're doing is you're reading from a source, taking a little creative license and moving the words around and re-saying the statement, again, keeping it objective, keeping it neutral, and putting it on Wikipedia. This is because everyone can use it. If you want to use it in a paper, if you want to distribute it, you need to be able to do that. And that's just something that the license and copyright necessitates. So Wikipedia is a community. These editors and what I hope you all are doing by joining us today and getting your username and going to the Wikipedia page that has all the information about all the artists from the period room and objects and books listed there is joining a community. The editorship of Wikipedia really is a community, and they are expected to treat each other with respect and civility. Like any community you're a part of, you don't want bad neighbors, you want nice neighbors, you want helpful people. And I think we all really do strive to play that role, right? Like, so AfroCrowd is a great set of neighbors for us. Wiki NYC is a great set of neighbors for Black Lunch Table, and we're happy to always work together on things like the Afrofuturist Period Room. Sometimes that's a mouthful. And then the last thing about the standards before we kind of like jump right into, I think we're going to look at Henry Taylor's page, is that Wikipedia doesn't have any firm rules. Although I'm telling you there's these guidelines and you need to do this and copyright and all these kind of things, it's also important to know, and this is Black Lunch Table's stance, I won't speak for anyone else, that sometimes because of the things like knowledge gaps, because of historical times or periods or peoples that weren't properly credited, written about, didn't get to tell their own story at any given time, we have to kind of come back around and do that. And what that does is it pushes up against the standards of power. Sometimes those are called white supremacy. Sometimes those are called hierarchy. Sometimes those are called institutions. Sometimes those are called lots of different things. But what that means is challenging what an artist's notability might be. Sometimes there's an idea that, and I think I'll talk about it here. Sometimes there's a Black artist who doesn't have what would be the kind of metric that most artists may be passed to become famous. So in Wikipedia, it's usually regarded as 2 museum shows, right? So 2 museum solo shows, which if you're in the arts, you might know is a big deal. It sometimes can be very difficult to achieve that in your career. But still, you could be working as an artist for your entire life. That doesn't mean that that person is not notable, that that person is not important to a huge group of like mentees or an institutional lineage of teaching. You know, being a craftsman that showed people in a certain town how to do stuff, right? There's a lot of different ways to be notable. And one of the things that we like to do at Black Lunch Table is assert that because the dominant culture has restrictive, repressive, or kind of limiting, I don't even know what to call them, limiting factors, right? Because oppression is real in society, that means that it also trickles down to things like getting articles written about you, being recognized by the paper, right? These things mirror one another. So we have to be bold in our editing, and this is true of all things in all knowledge gaps. There's other projects that concern themselves with this, like Women in Red. They make sure that they're getting the stories of all the women that are left off onto Wikipedia. So you have to kind of be bold about defining this nobility and using creative secondary resources to tell these stories. So also with notability, you know, you want them to have significant coverage. You can't do this about someone who's never had any press about them or only you know them. Those are not the appropriate things. But you should be encouraged to be bold. And if you think someone's notable and there's some references about them, then you know the worst thing that can happen is the page gets taken down. Just briefly about resources. I know I'm going very, very fast, but we'll have lots of time during editing to kind of go back to any of these and help you out if you need questions about this stuff. So when I say that things are objective and they need to be verifiable, we have to remember that you can't just make this information up out of the air. You have to back up this information with sources. So a very, very important part of Wikipedia is the citational practice. You need to be citing anything that you're putting. Although you alter what it is and you're not pulling direct, you know, paragraph sentences from a source, you still need to cite that source. Imagine someone wants to go back and be like, oh, that's really interesting. Like, I want to read more about when, you know, Johnny went to the museum. Great. Give them the source, give them the opportunity to follow their curiosity and go find that additional information. So when we talk about citations, always be thinking of published sources, academic peer-reviewed publications, university level texts. If you would use it in a research report and turn it in, great. No blogs, no Twitter feeds, nobody's personal websites those are not things that should be referenced. They're just they open up a can of worms that we don't really want to get to on Wikipedia. Again, copyright, you need to make sure that you're paraphrasing so you're not ripping anybody off as you're going along. And I'll just sort of put this up here. We'll give these again. As a new editor, it's always a little daunting once you kind of get yourself going and then there's not an edit-a-thon happening or you're trying to do it yourself. Just remember a couple of these places. Tea House is a really great place to start. There's always someone willing to kind of answer a question or get you going. If you do ever run into a dispute, there's a couple places that you can go to find help for that. Also, Wikipedia Etiquette. If you're wondering how you are supposed to behave as a new editor, or is this how you would edit this? Check out Wikipedia Etiquette. And then, of course, sometimes there are little frictive situations that happen. So staying cool when the editing gets hot, right? Like maybe you get into a thing, this is not true, or it's politically based or something like that. There are all resources on Wikipedia for things like that. While there's lots of us on here that can support you today, I just want to sort of put up my and Black Lunch Table's main contacts. You're always welcome to reach out to Black Lunch Table for any sort of thing going on. So I'm Rob Champion Girl is my Wiki username, and you can always email me at wiki@blacklunchtable. So now that I've done all that very, very fast kind of introing. I'm going to kind of jump right in so long as I can make sure I can share my screen. I'm gonna kind of talk through something that I would do if I was a new editor and how I might get going with, and maybe Andrew, just confirm for me that you can see this because I now can't see you all.
Yes, we can see your shared screen perfectly.
Okay, great. So everyone I hope has seen or has gotten a chance to go to this wonderful meetup page that NYC has set up so that you can see all of the objects and links and people included in the exhibition, the period room, I should say. So what I just kind of want to do today is talk about how I would kind of make a reference or a citational edit. I know I just have a few minutes, but I'm going to just choose the artist Henry Taylor. Henry is a great painter who lives out in LA. And here I am looking at his page. So the one thing I kind of want to just point out to folks is that there are, of course, 2 spaces that you can edit in. Today, we're just going to work in the sort of reader, what is it called? Not the reader space. I can't even think of what the word is, but it's the non-wiki code space, right? It's not the wiki text space. So that's what I'm showing you right now. And as a new user, this might feel really super overwhelming. And we don't want that for today. So instead, the visual editor, that's what it's called. Instead, we're gonna work in this space, which operates a lot more like editing a Google Doc or being in a word processing program. So I can be in here making changes as needed. Now, Henry's page is not perfect. If I were to make some changes, there needs to be some kind of subcategories in here, but he does have an info box over here with an image, which is really great because it kind of gives you a little snapshot about who he is and what he does. He has a description about what the page is. There's a little kind of graph right here that says, okay, this is who he is. He's a painter. He lives somewhere. This is what he's known for. Some info about his life, kind of a big block about his work that isn't very broken out. So maybe that's something over time I could work on. And some exhibitions he's been in, who he's represented by, and of course, there's some quotes, and then the references that are used in this article. So for today, what I kind of just want to make sure, and I sort of looked at this before, one, Henry is it's not listed that he's in the Afrofuturist Period Room, nor are some recent exhibitions. So I just kind of want to walk through very briefly what I did to find an article, and then we're going to make a citational, an inline kind of change with a citation, and that'll kind of walk you through how to make a first very basic but impactful edit. So when I'm editing, I usually go, well, let's actually do this. Let's just go Henry Taylor artist. And something really great that you can do to help yourself get towards those published good sources is just click news. And you're going to get the most recent things that include information or content about Henry Taylor. This seems to be about someone else. This is about LACMA's Interscope Records Show, which isn't totally focused on Henry Taylor. You kind of go through these things. These are all still about the LACMA show, sales at a market. Okay, but maybe like not the most important thing to what needs to be updated on his page. This still is about the LACMA stuff. Still about LACMA. Okay, Portrait of Kim Light. That's something, but it's on Artsy, which is fine, but like maybe not the best thing. And so let's go to this. Sports Illustrated is a known entity, right? It's been publishing online and in person for a long time. They're fact checked. It's not like someone's personal blog. So I feel fine about this source. it's always a learning experience when you're editing, because you literally have to read what these things say. You can't make an edit about something that you don't know what it says or what it's about. So I've kind of scanned this before. It's really great. It talks about the old practice in the Masters in the sport of golf of having black only caddies, and some of the paintings he did around that practice and when it was ended. So this looks like something that I could edit about. So in this case, I'm going to go back to my Wikipedia page. I'm going to just click on edit for a section about work. This is about work. So the edit I'm going to make, I would do in concert with other edits, right? Because I don't want to just throw a single sentence in here that's not connected to sort of what's around it. So while I'm only going to show you one sentence change, so you know how to do it, editing means you sometimes need to kind of make some other shifts to the page. So for our purposes, I can just sort of start a new sentence here. And I'm going to reference back to my article. You know, when was this show? Where was this show? What is some critical information here that I can include? So the show's name is Disappeared, but a Tiger Showed Up Later. Let's see when the show was. Okay, so August 1st, 2021. And literally, I'm just going to type this up. You'll also get to see my not always correct spelling. And I'm just going back and forth and making sure that, because this title is punctuated really not how I would expect, that I'm writing the right thing. So disappeared, comma, lowercase, lowercase. These things matter. People will come back and change them on you if you, that's comma later. If you make mistakes like this, they're okay to make, but you know, be diligent if you can.
And Eliza, I think you mentioned before that it's not uncommon for a Wikipedia editor to have 5, 10, 15 tabs open as you're going through your research, right?
Yeah, it's so, you know, because I'm trying to be short and I already know I'm over my time, but as I was just looking through this stuff this morning, I had a whole bunch. I had to read all those other articles first to know, oh, this isn't really good. This isn't really reasonable information. There's nothing here for me. So you end up having all these kind of research curiosity. Is this a good source? Is this saying anything? Things open, and you need to connect it with what already exists in the article. So for brevity, I wrote a short sentence. Again, if I was really editing this for real all the time, I would add more information and context around this, but I want to make sure that we get this kind of citation in. So I wrote a sentence. It's true based on this article. I didn't copy and paste anything. I wrote what I read. And the most important thing that I'm going to do right now is hit this Cite button. Great. Look at Wiki helping me get my citations right. I'm going to copy this URL. Of course, if you're using books, which are highly recommended, editing from physical books is still a real thing. Do it. It'll help you do that, but you can do it in manual. And of course, if you're citing many things from a single source, you're just going to hit reuse. Okay, I've put in my URL, hitting generate. Great. I am inserting this. Awesome. It's all there and formatted for me. It automatically lines up down in the references where it exists in the article. And then importantly, I'm not done. You're always pushing yourself to find this blue publish button. Awesome. Added exhibition about golf caddies. So let other people, let other editors know what you did in case they have a query about it or something seems sort of hinky or you need to backtrack on what you did. Good practice. Again, always pushing yourself towards that blue button. Make sure you're publishing your changes. Hopefully they go. What? I don't know why it doesn't want to publish my changes. Let's try one more time.
Yeah, try it again. Let's see what happens.
There we go. So importantly, when you have made a change, it moves you out of that edit, the visual editor, and puts me back in the read-only space with these 3 little tabs. But this is a great, great, great edit for all of you, not about Henry Taylor, but for all of you to find and make today as we're getting some editing time towards the end. And let's see, I guess I am going to stop sharing so we're not in crazy infinity camera mode. I know that was very quick. I said a lot of things about editing artists and why it's really important because we are in this knowledge gap of lots of things. It's not just Black artists, but that's what Black Lunch Table focuses on. There's so many edits on to be made about the artists in the show, the objects in the show. I know Andrew and Richard, you're going to talk about Wikidata, which is so critical for people finding and sort of cross-referencing all these things. And it's just a super, super rich space that we can all be working in today. So hopefully that little quick why we need to do this and why it's important for all editors, not just Black editors, but all of us to be working in these knowledge gaps. And really just a very rewarding, I love making just like inline changes, like, hey, here's a little thing that just happened. It's great. It's super, it means a lot to artists. I'll say that. It also means a lot to artists to have their accomplishments documented, because a lot of these are living people, right? And they're making work and they're doing things, they're winning awards, and that should all be there for all of us to see.
Great. Thank you so much, Eliza. It's great context. And I think even those numbers that you showed for percent male editors and underrepresentation of African-American editors in Wikipedia, the numbers may even be worse than those. So you're right on target with those things. And talk about intersectionality. You're talking about artists already hard to find on Wikipedia. Then Black women artists is even tougher in terms of finding sources. So you described that dynamic well.
Yeah, and we really do encourage using, finding like old, there's all sorts of archives out there for us to explore, and Wiki is really great for all of us to be able to kind of, it's a great central holding space, right? It really is.
Great, thank you. And what we're going to do is just give folks a little overview of the Meetup page that we have right now. And we want to re-welcome folks coming in on Facebook. I know that we had a little bit of a glitch, but we're now completely on Facebook at the Met account. So those of you joining us through Facebook, welcome. You are completely invited to come and add your comments, whether you're on Twitter, Facebook, or YouTube. And we can actually surface some of those comments on screen as we take a look at the different folks who are chiming in here. The page that we want to direct you to, Richard, you're going to explain to us a little bit more of where folks should go to find our resources today.
You can go to, we made a little shortcut. You can go to periodroom.org to get to the wiki page. There's the Wikimedia page, so you can see the list of the articles that we're encouraging people to work on. Artists who are in the exhibition, a bunch of them have articles on English Wikipedia. A bunch of them don't. About, I think, 8 artists in the exhibition do not have any articles in English Wikipedia. So if you'd like to start one today, that would be great. Also, if you speak a couple languages and you want to translate, say between English and another language, that would be great. I know we have some people, speak different languages. We also invite you, if you want to, you can join we have a chat on Discord, which you're welcome to join. We'll be running today and also for the whole month, actually. If you want to ask questions or get feedback on anything you're doing, you're welcome to do that.
Great. If you're on Facebook, you can go to streamyard.com/Facebook so that when you comment, we can actually see your face and your name on there. So again, that's streamyard.com/Facebook. So that's something that you can do to authenticate yourself there. So we can show comments like that on screen directly from your accounts. So we did have some questions about how do you cite Wikipedia in different formats. And what we thought we'd do is just kind of get you folks started on looking at the Meetup page, maybe finding some things that resonate with you that you may want to try to investigate and edit. And what we'll do is we'll have these little sprints of maybe 5 or 10 minutes where we're just going to let you work, but we're happy to answer questions during that time. But it really is meant to give you the time to look around and to find something that might inspire you. We might show you some visuals from the period room just to give you some mood there, because I know it's much more inspirational to see some of these things, but we don't want to interrupt you. So we'll give you about 5 or 10 minutes of sprint time to look around and to try out your editing. And feel free to send your questions in through the chat and we'll be happy to answer them. But also feel free to not pay attention to what's going on screen and to keep working on your articles or the things that you want to look at there. So let's show you a little bit of what we have prepared for you in the Meetup page here. So as you see, this is the main Meetup page. The basic articles here around the Afrofuturist room here, we actually have an article for the period room itself. Richard, you know more about this than I do. Tell us a little bit about what you think is going on.
We do have an article on the period room, which just started, I think, the day before yesterday by user rhododendrites. Still, there's a lot more to do. There's been a lot of coverage of the different artworks and the meaning behind them, the history behind them, and their connections with cultural history. And if you see on the Meetup page, there's also a list of about a dozen different reviews and different publications. And feel free to use these all as resources. Some of them are already in use here, but I know there are a lot of aspects, like a number of the works in the show are inspired by items that were found during excavations in 2011. So there could be more about that. There could be more about some of the sort of the prominent highlight pieces of the show, and more about actually some works were commissioned for the show. Some works were acquired for the exhibition, and some works were commissioned for the exhibition. And all of that, it would be great if it was there, as well as working on the articles on the artists themselves.
Right. So we tried to inventory all the artists that are mentioned. As you can see, only around half of them actually have an article about them. So if you're so inspired, you can actually try to start one. We actually don't recommend for absolute beginners to try to start a new article because it's kind of a heavy lift for that. But we absolutely welcome you to try to add to the existing articles. As Eliza said, add reliable sources, add things from reputable places for these types of articles. In addition, some of the either artifacts or the things mentioned in the period room actually have articles here, like Seneca Village has an article there. There's a number of books on display there, which someone has inventoried very nicely there. We actually have what we call a knowledge graph. So we won't get into this right now. Maybe later on the edit-a-thon, we can talk a little bit more about kind of the next generation of Wikipedia content. But if you just want to see very quickly, we actually have a database of the objects and the actual assets related to the period room, and we can actually visually see the relationships among these things in something like this. So this is pretty cool in that if this is the center here, which is the period room, we can see that there are parts of the period room, including the wallpaper, the television. We can see the artists related to this. We can see the types of artifacts that are there. So if we have time later on, we can go deeper into that. But that's kind of a neat visual way of experiencing it. We also have an inventory of the different artworks here, including the titles and the Met ID, so you can actually look up this information at the Met website. Another thing that you can also do if you want to be motivated by the visuals, you can actually go to the Met landing page for the exhibition and look at the exhibition objects here. And you can see this is a pretty nice breakdown of all the objects that are in the period room here. And later on the edit-a-thon, we can go deeper into why aren't all these images on Wikipedia? Well, there's copyright issues and a lot of restrictions on especially modern pieces of art here. But this is a great way to visually browse through that. And we'll show some videos later around that. And then finally, at the bottom here, if you're very interested in this, you can actually see that there's a YouTube video, which is a great virtual opening right here. It's 27 minutes long, but we've actually indexed every single section of that video here. So if you're interested in looking at the pottery and ceramics, you can jump to 13 minutes into the video. If you're interested in the shoes by Willie Cole, which is really fascinating to see here, you can go to 17 minutes and 33 seconds into the video. Even better, you can just click on the link and it'll jump you directly into that section of the YouTube video right there. So later on, I think Richard and I will also demo how might you use YouTube videos as a reference in articles. Now, this is not always accepted in Wikipedia, but for something like this, it's high quality from a reputable organization like the Met, it can be used as supplemental material, what's in a Wikipedia article. So those are just some of the things that you can use, and we encourage you to browse through there, find something that might resonate or that you're interested in trying to edit. You might want to try to edit the bio of an artist. You might want to look into the Seneca Village article. And if you have any questions, please do let us know in the chat, and we can surface them and answer them while you are still all working out there. And maybe while we're doing these things, we can bring in folks like Eliza and Sherry and Ian and Anna Matisse to answer any questions around these types of topics. So anything else, Richard, to add before we give folks about 5 or 10 minutes to go off?
Just that, I mean, Wikipedia is there for everyone to edit, and we want to encourage a broader and more diverse editorship. And just try to make a small edit. You know, maybe find an artist that you're interested in and, you know, add a new fact. And maybe add a citation if you could find, you know, where it came from a particular website or a news source. Just, you know, try to make one edit and you might get hooked. So look forward to it. And if you have any questions, we'll be glad to help you in the chat.
Yes. So it's 1:10 right now, Eastern time. So we're going to give you at least 10 minutes. So let's say for the next 10 minutes, go off and take a look at this page. Again, periodroom.org is the fastest way to get to this page. Go there. And then if you don't have an account, we can show you on screen how to create an account. But for anyone else who already has an account, just go on and keep working and you don't have to pay attention to us in the background as we show some new editors how to create an account and to also sign up, right? So one of the first things you can do, if you have an account already, you can click on the sign up button right here. And you can see that it's going to use this strange incantation there, but all it does is sign your name at the bottom. So all I'm going to do is hit publish changes. And I think I'm going to sign up twice here, but anyway, we'll go and take a look. And you can see that there I am. I have actually signed up on the list here, although I'm already up here. But that's the easiest way to register, you know, that I'm working on something in this edit-a-thon. We'd love to make sure that you do that because there's some really nice stats that we can show in terms of how many words are added and how many images are added to things there. Richard, do we want to show folks how to create an account very quickly, or just to make sure folks know?
Yeah, and also I think Sherry wanted to chime in.
Yeah, Sherry, please go ahead.
Sure. It's been great to hear a little bit more through the folks from the Met about this exhibit. So as you go through the page, the Afrofuturist page, you know, take a look at not only the information that's listed here, but look deeper into what ways you can go beyond what you see on the page. For example, there's ways to make the information that's included in the exhibit, the specific artifacts themselves. You can look into, okay, what's the history of pieces like this? what ways do they connect with not only the Black community, but what is the meaning behind this piece, for example? I know in my presentation I had some items on there. I'm not sure if we're still going to get to that, but it's really fascinating. One thing I do is I love museum, and I love the idea of a period room where you can just take your time and take a look at all the different representations that are in the period room, in the exhibit itself, and so forth. So I'm not sure, are we going to get to that part, or
Yeah.
should we just kind of hold off on that?
Yeah, we'll probably in about 20, 30 minutes get to be able to go deeper dive into that, and we're going to
Awesome.
give
That's
you the
exciting.
floor on that. Yeah, because I think that's a great thing to dive into. Absolutely. So I think
so there's different dimensions of the information and different ways to go about it to make it not only interesting for you as the editor, but also see ways that it matches and is interplayed with your life and your interests, and ways that you can go beyond the information that's available and make it something that can be really a not only good research for you, but also just very fascinating meditation on the work itself.
Yeah, great point. And we'll give Sherry some more time to talk about that as well after we see some of your results out there. Now, if you don't have an account yet, you can go to create an account. This is very simple. You actually don't even need to put in anything more than a username and password, but we do recommend you put in an email address because it's the only way to get your password back if you forget it. And as Eliza said, we prefer probably you don't put too much personal information out there. That you might want to use a pseudonym or some favorite nickname that you use out there. So just use a username, password, and then confirm an email address. And that will get you an account on Wikipedia. And there's a lot more that you can do with customizing your environment and everything after that. So again, we're going to give you another 5 or 7 minutes to keep working or identify stuff. Feel free to put in the chat the things that you are going to be working on. We'd love to hear what you are interested in and want to try out. This will also let other folks know whether there's an issue with working on the same thing. So some folks like Rosa here says work on a draft of ZZ Fu Po's. Well, that's great to see. Someone has asked if there is a schedule for the edit-a-thons. If you're asking about this particular edit-a-thon, we're going to do like little sprints of 10-minute work and like 5-minute evaluating the types of things you've worked on or explain things based on the things that you found. And we found this kind of works better than over instructing you. You'd rather have this kind of back and forth, seeing what people are interested in learning. So that's something that we wanted to give you time to work on. So it's going to be like little 10-minute sprints for folks to work on content. All right. So go ahead.
Andrew, I'll just say, if right, because yes, we have this event today, but all of our groups have events other times, right? So like for Black Lunch Table on February 20th, we have office hours. So if any of you, in addition to using the Discord channel and kind of signing up on the Meetup page, there are other ways to get support, live support, not just emailing or pinging another user. But there's always groups having edit-a-thons. Most of them, unfortunately, are online now because of our continued pandemic life. But yeah, you can hop on to edit-a-thons all month, all the time.
And we also have tutorials. Afrocrowd, for example, we're going to show some of those later on. But there's lots of ways to not only connect. All of our groups, like Eliza mentioned, have different ways to edit. You can edit in the language of your choice through translate-a-thons. We also have events to help you figure out how to upload images to Wikipedia and use different kinds of data that you can add to Wikipedia. And of course, to teach you how to edit Wikipedia, just like we've kind of been going through today. All you've got to do is connect today. We have the page that we've been showing you, which you can find. Where can you find it, Richard? Today's editing page.
Periodroom.org is the place you can find it quickly.
Awesome. And that allows you to connect with not only those of us here who have been connecting, but also there's tons of different groups on Wikipedia that are welcoming like we're talking about, every month there's something going on. So one of the things that I know that Afrocrowd tries to do is increase awareness of the editing community, of the Wikimedia movement in general, to people of African descent. And also, it just makes it fun to connect with people on a regular basis, to learn about groups like Black Lunch Table, to learn about groups like Wikimedia New York City and different chapters, as well as groups like Women in Red, which we've mentioned. There's a place for you. We want to welcome you to the community. We want to make you not only know that there's opportunities to edit and to learn and grow in that way, but to also be a part of this amazing community that is wanting to be open with the knowledge of the world, and as welcoming and as inclusive of knowledge from everywhere, to platforms like Wikipedia, and also sharing knowledge in general. So take advantage of this. This is a great opportunity to not only connect with us, but also just to grow yourself, grow your information, learn about amazing exhibits like we're talking about today at the Met, and that's around the corner from you if you're in New York City or a short drive away, that allow you to expand your knowledge, expand your mind, and to grow as a person. But also a great opportunity that's available in virtual space, online all the time, to connect, to develop skills, to expand your understanding of things, and also to be able to share knowledge. So today is a great time to do that. As we're showing you the link on the screen, get yourself a Wikipedia account. We'll show you how, if you need to. You can ask questions in the comment section if you need help with that. And also use this as an opportunity to finally connect, to make that next step, to try something different, especially in this time when we're all kind of cloisters in our homes, this is don't let the opportunity pass you by. And of course, Afrocrowd.org/about is a great way to connect with us if you'd like to do that.
Yeah, thank you. And this is, lots of activities this whole month around, Black history, right? And this is a great question from Jim Henderson. Where are the link to today's edit-a-thons every day? Now, we don't have a perfect calendar in our Wikimedia community, right? But this is not bad as a starting point. And we're still adjusting to the reality that people are very interested in virtual events. It used to be most of our Wikipedia events were in real life and not necessarily globally, virtually all the time. So in fact, this is a okay, but not perfect representation of where the meetups are. So you can see different cities or different chapters or user groups around the world host different things. So you look at Wikipedia Meetup, and that's a good starting point for these things. There's another question here about logos and images. This might be a good time to very quickly talk a little bit about images. And the thing we mentioned before is we've got all these images on the Met site. How come they're not on Wikipedia? It's a complex question, right, Eliza? It's like, especially as an artist, that you're an artist, and that, especially for things contemporary, we're still very much governed by copyright. And in general, unless something has been explicitly released as free or as public domain because it's very old, you're not going to be having much that's modern or created recently as images that you can find on Wikipedia, right?
Yeah, you gotta look out for those permissions. People want credit for things, and they deserve the credit for things. Like, why not? If I made something or you took that photo, you want someone else to know that that's the photo you took, right? It's part of a circular economy of all sorts of things. But images on Wikipedia, and to this user for logos, I think, just to specifically answer that question, you can name someone, but pulling logos from someone else's whatever website or something maybe isn't the best plan. But images, and maybe Richard, you also want to talk about your work at the Met, but images have to be released by both the photographer and the artist sometimes if it's their work. Those kind of things are under copyright, which means they cannot be included on Wikipedia. And what's the copyright years? 99 years? 97 years?
It just keeps getting longer. I don't know.
Yes, it used to be that, in the days of old, it used to be like patents, like 17 years past the death of the author. Now we're up to 95, I think it is, Richard. So, the Congress, at least in the United States, extended that term longer and longer and longer and longer. So it's tough. But I thought we could talk about a specific example here that we were just discussing the other day. You'll notice that the article we have about the period room, you're like, well, wouldn't it be great to have a picture right there? Like, let's put a picture there. Oh boy, that's loaded. Right? As Eliza just said, if you look at this, look at all the different items in there, and each one has a different copyright issue around it, right? So you can't have a close-up of all these things because we don't have the copyright to these things. There is this principle in terms of copyright, it's called de minimis. So if you are taking the picture of something and the majority of it isn't under copyright, but small parts of it are, you do have some leeway to upload that. So my example here that I think we've concluded is mostly okay is this picture. And you're probably wondering, well, that's not a great picture, but you'll notice that the copyrighted elements are actually very small and in the background of this picture. And that is actually one of the few times where it's kind of okay to upload an image with clearly copyrighted content, but because it's such a small proportion of the image, it's okay to upload to Wikimedia Commons. Otherwise, if you wanted a close-up of the chandelier there or a close-up of the chairs, you really could not do that because they're still under copyright, right? So I thought I'd bring in also Jeannie here, who's our digital collections expert here, and get maybe some of your take on this as well. Like, we're limited in what we can upload. The Met declares a huge chunk of its images as open access, but most of these contemporary pieces, Jeannie, are not under that policy, right?
That's correct. If an object is in the public domain, you will see a download button on our object page, but there are some historic pieces in the period room, but all the contemporary works are under copyright and are not downloadable. But I also want to point out, we have Wikidata items for these works under copyright. We just don't link an image to them. So there are ways these copyrighted works can have a presence on the Wiki platform, and that's namely through Wikidata. And I think almost all the objects by the contemporary artists have Wikidata items. Unfortunately, no image. And the Wikidata item is, basic information, but even that is really useful. And I hope we have some time at the end to talk about Wikidata and the importance of Wikidata to things like search engines and voice assistants, and what a big difference it makes to have something on Wikidata.
Yeah, good point. Yeah, we have Wikidata items, so we can describe it, and you can't copyright the description of anything, right? In terms of its dimensions, what color it is, or all these different things. So we have very good descriptive metadata for these objects, but not necessarily the images.
The basic principle is we just want to create a resource that's not just usable for Wikipedia, that's usable for anyone in any context. So, if say people want to use it as part of a as part of like in a classroom or something like that, we want as much of the information, including the pictures, that can be reused widely. So you don't have to because the images on Wikipedia aren't there because Wikipedia has special permission. We have a rule against special permission. So we either have things that are public domain, or we use something under the terms of fair use, and we sort of have a careful legal fair use justification saying we're using this, but only for educational purposes, and we're not using a very high resolution, and we're using it only on this page and not on that page, just so we can be as reused as widely as possible.
Yes. So we'll give folks a few more minutes to keep working on things, and we'll check in. But feel free to send us in the comments any kinds of things that you're working on. We'd love to hear what artifacts or artists or anything has gotten you interested in editing content. So that's something that we'd love to see more of in terms of showing us the kind of work that you're interested in doing. So if we have time later, maybe we could show folks how we actually upload this image and incorporate it into an article. But these are the types of things that, at least on the image side of things, we think a lot about for Wikipedia content. So let's look down the list a little bit more and see what other things we can find. This is the table of objects here. So you can see that the image column here is very much missing a lot of content there. Sometimes we have images of the artists there, but even then, it's sometimes very hard to get images of artists because we need to make sure they are completely free images, and just that is a challenge as well. All right. So any other questions from folks? Feel free to send them through the chat. otherwise, what we can do is demo a few other things related to article editing. Is there anything else we want to add here to the article, Richard? You were just talking about how this has been built out a lot in the last day or two.
Yeah, I mean, there's still, a lot. There's a lot to remain. There's a lot of descriptions of individual artworks, and there's, description of the overall how the process went. So just, use everything that's in reviews, that's in all the journalism that's been about the show. You can use some things that are from the Met. Actually, there's quite a bit that's in the longer version of the video presentation, as well as the text that's online that could be cited. You can cite videos on Wikipedia. Not every video on YouTube, but if it's from if it's like an institutional thing, like from a museum, you can cite that. So we encourage you, because it has a nice start, but there is a lot more to go, and it would be nice to have this as like a really built out article, and also to link to all of the concepts, link to all of the artists that are referenced, link to all of the cultural concepts and the historic concepts that are relevant. It would be nice if as an outcome of this project we could have a really developed article in the exhibition, and that is built as like a tree connecting to all of the other topics that the even like something like the concept of the period room. We don't have an article on Wikipedia on the period room per se. And obviously the period room has a certain history. It has ups and downs of what it's good for. But it would be nice to develop that concept and include it from the start, with sort of the criticism of the concept of the period room and how it's been adapted in this and in other instances as well. So that'd be kind of interesting if anyone wants to work on that and adapt some of what the presentation about the period room was.
Great, good point. All right, so if there's anything else that folks want to show, we'll just show one little thing about how to upload the image, and then Sherry, we're going to give you the floor to talk a little bit about what you've been doing with Afrocrowd, which has been amazing, and just the types of activities that you've been supporting. So this is the image that we saw before of the Afrofuturist Period Room. As we said, this is taking advantage in some ways of the fact that most of the image is not subject to copyright, in that it's just the walls and some signage, but in back, at least you can get some idea of what the exhibit is about. We also have this weird no entry sign in the front, so we could have done better with the moving the sign, but I didn't want to upset any of the guards at the Met when we did that. But at least we have some kind of image here that we can put up there. First thing we want to notice is that it's kind of crooked, so we probably want to straighten that out. So I've done that by straightening it a little bit there. So we've got this basic image. So the next thing we can do is go to Commons, which we haven't shown you really, but Wikimedia Commons is our image repository, right? So this is where every image that you see in Wikipedia comes from this repository. So we're going to actually upload this image, and I'm going to bring this in here. This is a picture I took, so I can claim that I took it, and I don't have to worry about it being something that's been copied from somewhere else. I'm going to hit continue. So it's very fast because it's a very small JPEG file. I can say this file is my own work, and I'm going to share it with a Creative Commons share alike license, which is the one that we recommend for folks who are taking their own pictures. And this is not a useful title, so I'm just going to say Met Afrofuturist Room outside, like that. And this was 2021-12. So you might want to add something unique like the date afterwards, and I'll say Met Afrofuturist December 1. So try to put something descriptive there. Put the same thing there. There's the date that's been added automatically. I don't know, Richard, what should I put here? Do we have a special?
I guess
The general category for now.
Yeah, there's probably
one category. Yeah, and then people can help come around and add more categories to this, and at least one category is useful there. And then I'm going to hit publish the file. All right, so not too bad. I mean, the hard work is making sure you have the rights to this. So this is the image now, and we actually can add more information here if we wanted to add some descriptive data to it. We're just going to skip this step for now. And then we actually have the file name that exists on the internet. So if any of you now can go out there and load up this image that I've uploaded to Wikimedia Commons right there. Now, the cool thing is I can actually go in now and use this file name to insert that into the article. So if I go in here, before yesterday we could fly, I can go ahead and edit this page. And I can actually just go in here and insert an image. And it's even smart enough, I think, to look at my recent uploads if I wanted to, but I'm just going to go ahead and paste in that link right there. And there's my image. Use this image. And I'm saying, no, that's not the best title. Okay, I'm going to say insert. And there we are. And now we have an image in the article. I'm going to publish it. Okay. And as Liza said before, if we want to do something more useful, we turn this into a real info box with description of when the room was opened and the curators and all that. But for now, this is not a bad visual thing to add to it, right? So this is a pretty safe way of adding an image because all the copyright elements are in the background. And again, this is called the de minimis policy that we have to allow these types of things to be uploaded. All right, so that's just showing a basic image edition. So Sherry, what do you hear from you now about what are your reflections now in the middle of well, not getting in the middle of the month, but so many activities happening in February around Black History Month and the types of things that you're working on and how you view Wikipedia as fitting into the mission of what AfroCrowd wants to achieve.
Sure. First of all, let me say this is just a phenomenal work, and this is a great opportunity, like I mentioned before. That's available. You can not only at the Met, but also online to get to know more about these artifacts and so forth. And it's great to hear just Liza's explanation of how you can go into the work and get to know more about the artists and so forth, and how relevant it is to not only the history of the Black community, but also New York history in general and just general knowledge that sometimes, well, oftentimes can be overlooked. Who knew that when you're walking through Central Park, that you're actually walking on the site of this amazing history and this amazing knowledge, not only of where we've been, but where we're going. So when you look at an exhibit like this, it allows you to see what also could have been possible if history had been different, right? But then you get to walk through it and take a look at the different artifacts, the different entries that are in this exhibit that allow you kind of to, you can just stop, especially if you're there physically, just stop, take a look at it, and learn a little bit more beyond what you're seeing by then going to Wikipedia and kind of diving into the piece itself, right? Let me take first of all, let me tell you a little bit about AfroCrowd. AfroCrowd, in short, is an initiative that is aimed in the wiki community that's aimed at increasing awareness of the African diaspora on Wikipedia. That's both in editing, as well, both in content and in content creation, right? I think it can be forgotten that you can edit Wikipedia, that you can improve the information you see. If something's missing, that you can add to that information. And in short, and in long, you can read a little bit more about us here. We've been around since 2015, working in not only in the New York community where we started as a meetup, but we've grown to be different parts of the country. We've had partners in different parts of the world, and we've been at the United Nations, at universities like Columbia University, New York, as well as work with grassroots organizations and museums as well, and like MoMA and many others. So every month since 2015, we've been holding events, whether it's in person or virtually, to help people who are interested in editing Wikipedia and entering the community have sort of a welcoming community to say, hey, you're welcome. And not only are you welcome, but we could help you along as you just get started, whether you know how to even use a computer in some cases, all the way to if you're an advanced PhD who has information that you'd like to add. We've worked from anyone from doctors and nurses to professors and students, like we are this month at Howard University, where you can join us on the at the end of the month on the 26th. We're also, along with this project, we're going to be helping anyone who's interested as you go along through the page that we were just looking at on Wiki. You can go through and take a look and see ways that you're interested in connecting. But we also have things like YouTube tutorials that are free and available whenever you want that can show you how to edit. So let's go to that. I believe that you have an example of one of our tutorials available. If we could load that up. Now, you were just talking about adding information to Wikipedia, for example, adding visual information. Let's say you wanted to upload an image. And you heard what Andrew said here today, but you're at home and you have a few minutes and you're thinking, oh, let me try this out. Well, not only can you come back to this video, which will also be available on YouTube, but you can go to our information online by just by searching Afrocrowd on YouTube, and it'll help you on demand with whatever information that you need. Not only that, on the page that we have for you today, there are many different links that you can use to kind of walk through, for example, how to use a citation, how to add information in a different language, how to do the research and use published sources for the information that you add and so forth. And also on the guidelines of Wikipedia that help your information not only add the information, but for it to stick for a long time. Are we any closer to that link? We'll make that available later.
Yeah, we'll get in a few minutes. Go ahead. Sorry.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So this is an example of what we have available for you. These were made in-house, specifically about 2 minutes long each, 1 or 2 minutes long each, and they're available in Spanish or in English. And we also have some that are going to be coming in Haitian Creole and more to come. Now, I wanted to touch on a few things that are in the exhibit that I found personally interesting, that may be, maybe something to look into. For example, growing up, I have natural hair. Growing up, my friends, sometimes my friends and I would get together to do our hair. And sometimes I straighten my hair, right? And I straighten my natural hair, sometimes with a hot comb. So when I was looking at the exhibit and I saw not only this comb, which, there are different versions of it. Some call it a pick and so forth. That made this immediately more relevant to me, right? And so not only can you go into Wikipedia and learn about combs like this and where they come from, what they mean, but also you can add information to it. You can add information from present day about these kinds of combs, about, I know for me, my hair being natural, there's not always a lot of information, at least growing up, about how to take care of my particular hair. And that's something that I know a lot of people have experienced. Lately, that's not as much of a challenge, but increasing knowledge about this, reading more about it, reading about the history of it, and also knowing that artists are making representations of it in exhibits like this, it comes around full circle, right? So here you are, bear with me because I'm very visual, so just follow me along. You go to the Met, this gorgeous, huge museum in New York City, New York freaking city, right? And here you are, you hear about this exhibit from today's event or wherever, and you come to the period room. And in the period room, I wish there was a picture of it right now, but you'll see some of these exhibits here, right? You come to this other one we have here, the jitterbug, right? I used to swing dance years ago when it had come back into prominence, right? I love to dance in general. And swing dancing was just another great way to not only get connected to this awesome dance, but you can learn about what's the background of the jitterbug. You know, what's the background of this dance? Well, how were people expressing themselves using this type of dance, right? Here, over here, you have information about Sojourner Truth. Now, Sojourner Truth, you might be hearing more about now because it's Black History Month, right? And she's a staple during Black History Month. But when you go to something like Wikipedia, you go deeper into who she was. Where was she born? What kinds of things did she, how did she grow up? What was her environment? And also, why is this person not only important to Black history, but to history in general? Because Black history is our history, right? It's world history. But not only that, me as somebody who wants to know more about this, I can see in front of me the representation. I can go deeper into the knowledge about it using something like Wikipedia, and I can add to that knowledge from other items that I can research or learn about. And let's say you grew up with the jitterbug. What was that experience like? Let's say you were from the areas where it was first developed, and you have pictures or images from growing up, and you just happen to have. We've had people at our events who happen to have images that they didn't know were just very historical images. One person had an image of a woman who later became very prominent in the community, just sitting there on her phone. And now we have an image of that. So things like this allow an entry into knowledge, right? We're looking at Afrofuturism. You know, Afrofuturism, for me at least, is a place of hope, right? We know what the past was. We can read about it. We know what the past was. But in an exhibit like this, for me, when you're in it, you see what could have been. You get to know a little bit more about artifacts like this, artistic works like this, our representation of it. But you also have an entry into, okay, so what more can I learn about this? What more can I share about this? What ways can I swim in the information? And for me, at least, this is an area of hope, because hope allows you to see what can be. It allows you to see what ways. Okay, looks like we're ready to go. All right, I get it. I've said enough. But you
No, sorry, I didn't mean to play it over you, but I had it ready. So go ahead. Sorry.
When you see it, you can be it, right? When you can imagine it, you can go there. When you see something like this, you can find connections to your current life and where you'd like to see in the future, and it invigorates your interest in the past. I want to know more about Seneca Village now, right? Because of this. And guess what? When I do know more about it and learn more about it, I can go to Wikipedia to get started. I can look at the bibliography at the bottom of the information that's there, right? Which is great information connecting to our world. And then from there, I can go research even more. I can go to the Schomburg, which I'm very excited to know had something to do with this exhibit. And I can learn more about what I saw and add that information for the rest of the world. So this is great. It's a great way to not only, you don't have to be a person of color to be interested in this, but as a person of color, right? This is not only fascinating, but it makes me feel good to know that something like this is something that's being talked about, reinvigorated in the imaginations of people, and that we have artists who are working to continue that and to grow it. And I'm very grateful and happy to see that the Met has invested in that. We're about to play a video, but that's just my take on it. And I'm very excited to see throughout this month what people come up with, ways that to what artists we can learn about, what art we can learn about, and also the artifacts themselves and what they mean about the history of New York, the history of the country, as well, of course, about the history of the Black community and its future, right? And just reinvigorating the imagination, especially during a time when we're so cloistered in our present. So if you can open to the YouTube video.
Yeah, thanks, Sherry. And then what we'll do is we'll play your YouTube video. I know that Ian had a question and wanted to talk about some of these things. It'd be awesome to get that. And then we encourage folks to keep working if you want to keep working. But then before the end at 2:00, I thought we'd play just the last minute or two of the Met's virtual opening, which had Hannah Beekler talk about almost exactly what you talked about, Sherry, that the representation matters so much. And if she can inspire just one Black child to like see themselves in this exhibit,
exactly.
It's just incredible.
Yes.
And I saw that, and you could hear her voice just like so choked up, and it was so wonderful to see that. So we're going to show your video, then we'll bring Ian and Anna Matisse to see if they want to ask you folks any questions about the things that we're seeing here, and then we'll play it out with the final video from the Met. So here we go.
Wikipedia is a crowdsourced encyclopedia. This means that, 1, it's an encyclopedia much like Encyclopedia Britannica, which it actually put out of business, but with one major twist. Wikipedia is crowdsourced. That means anyone who wants to contribute can. Consider this. Traditionally, encyclopedias like the ones you may have at home or find at the library were written exclusively by academics who were considered experts. Wikipedia, however, does the opposite. The online platform is designed so that whoever wants to contribute is welcome. This is crowdsourcing, the practice of inviting a large group of people to give input to a project or goal. It's similar to crowdfunding, where perhaps if you are making a film, you could announce that you'll accept donations from anyone interested in supporting the project, regardless of whether or not they actually know anything about film. You may have seen projects like these while perusing your social media or even donated to a few. But the fact that anyone can edit Wikipedia doesn't mean there aren't guidelines, standards, or layers of quality control. In fact, Wikipedia has volunteers around the world who diligently monitor the platform to ensure that entries are well-sourced and free of errors. That's a lot of responsibility since the website gets way over 374 million unique searches a month. If you'd like to help out, you're more than welcome.
Okay, so if we could pause. Okay, so this is an example of one of the tutorials that we have. And I'm trying so you don't see my information in the back. Okay, we know where we are at. So that's an example of something that you can play at 3:00 in the morning if you're interested in editing Wikipedia. You're like, oh, I was excited about this today, but time has passed, and I only have a few minutes. So 2 minutes of your time, 1 or 2 minutes of your time, and you'll go bit by bit onto the other one. I have one more to show you. We won't go through for the whole thing, but it touches on some of the ways that you can continue this process. Don't stop today. Continue this process. Get yourself an account, and you'll be a Wikimedian. That's all it takes, and we can join you in your process as you grow. So if we could play the next one, it touches on what Andrew mentioned earlier.
Oh, I'm not sure I have that second video, Sherry. I had that one.
Okay, so basically, go to afrocrowd.org/about, and that's a good place to start if you're looking for more information about how to connect to the community, more information about editing, on whether it's video or with groups. And we can also help connect you to other groups that maybe you saw today or you heard about. Beyond that, you could also go to the page for today, which if you could mention it again, Richard, there you go. The page for today, which was periodroom.org. And that will allow you not only to connect with what we're doing at this moment, but it will challenge you to get started on your journey, right? And usually when we have events, we like to say, do one contribution, right? So during this whole month, you'll be hearing more about this. You can go to hashtag Met Afrofuturist, which I believe is the hashtag that the Met is using. You can connect with any of us. I have if I'm going to go back to my presentation quickly, how do I do that? There we go. And these are the way to get connected with us, at least. And then the Met Afrofuturism room, you can learn more about by going to the Met online. So there is absolutely no reason that after today you don't give it a try. And that's that's one of the best case scenarios, is that you get interested and you give it a shot. And maybe you get bored later, but for now, just give it a shot and see. We have had a lot of people tell us, oh, this was so empowering. I didn't expect it to be so empowering to add information to Wikipedia, right? So why not? Okay, that's my bit.
Thanks.
Thanks, Sherry. Obviously, until about for another hour or so. And as we go along, if you have questions, please ask. That's what we're here for. Thank you so much. And thank you so much, Met, and Wiki NYC and Black Lunch Table. This has been amazing so far, and I hope everyone watching is enjoying themselves.
Great.
And
Thanks,
you,
Sherry.
Wikipedia Weekly.
Oh, thank you. And I was so happy to be able to visit the Period Room in person with Sherry. Sherry and I have been to many interesting places together, including when the African American History and Culture Museum in DC opened. We were there that very 6 a.m. in the morning for that. So
we were there at 5 a.m. in the morning.
Oh, 5 a.m. Sorry, 6 a.m. is late.
Is that right? You did an edit-a-thon while you're waiting in line with the...
Yeah, we did. We edited Wikipedia while waiting in line at 5 a.m. to get into the African American History and Culture Museum. So it's really, we've been through a lot. So,
and if I can mention, we have opportunities to help people who want to edit Wikipedia in different languages too. So please ask about that. We have an opportunity coming up even in the next month for that.
That's great. Great. Ian, I know you had a great question or want to talk about some of these things.
Well, I'm so excited, and Sherry and Eliza, especially both of you, thank you so much for your helpful hints. I'm super excited. Just made my first wiki edit. I added Tourmaline's acquisitions and her participation in the room to her wiki page. I had a question though that came up. No, it feels great. And I love to, and Sherry, your presentation made me think of this, that I think a lot of our curatorial thinking behind this room is exactly as you described your experience of it, that, one object might open up a whole world into your own personal lived experience, but also the experience of those who came before us and those who may still be all around us. And so each object chosen so carefully, in a way, indexed against, what we know now was at Seneca Village, what we think may have been at Seneca Village, what could still be at Seneca Village. And so that's, for us, part of the incredible power of Afrofuturism as a creative mode of thinking curatorially, as well as artistically, and all those other things. All of this made me think, and prompted too by all the amazing people in this room right now, this morning, this afternoon, is also thinking of these lives lived that really represented in the room, not only the artists incorporated in this show, but really one of our mascots in the show, the extraordinary deep sea diver who's portrayed in Henry Taylor's portrait. And her name is Andrea Motley Crabtree, a very evocative name to begin with. And I started looking into Andrea's life well before this project was even in a glimmer in our eyes. The Met acquired this painting a few years before we even started thinking about the period room. And there's a long story about how, that amazing work came into the picture, so to speak, in the room. Of course, it sort of slides right in an amazing way. Looks over the whole room, particularly the living room, with her kind of magisterial presence. But I was struck, Eliza, about what you were saying about editing other folks' biographies online. And I think Andrea's case, she has an extraordinary biography. She has a very wonderful personal blog about her own history. She's the first woman and the first Black woman to be a U.S. Army deep sea diver. And this pioneering career of hers is, of course, one of the things I think that drew the artist to portraying her to begin with. But how do we fill in, this is my kind of open-ended question, how do we fill in a really replete biography for this groundbreaking woman who is portrayed in this wonderful portrait that's in the Met's collection, when there are very few biographical sources for her that are not personal blog entries, right? Thankfully, I noticed on our event page today, there's a link to, I think, the US Army Museum or something like that, where there is maybe a mention. But other than that, there's very little out there that is kind of from a good documentary source. So I'm wondering how we might approach that as a question. There she is.
Thanks, Ian. By complete coincidence, I was fascinated by her last night too, and added some of these sources. As you said, the sourcing for her is a little tough, other than the Army. So I would love to hear about more ideas on how to find more sources.
I mean, it's interesting. I could tell a little anecdote very quickly, and Eliza, I know you were having some connectivity issues just now, but when this work was acquired by the museum, before the period room went into existence, I based my own write-up about this work on her website and on what I knew from the artist. And it went online. And so, of course, it's interesting that in our capacity, Anna Matisse and I, for example, as professionals at the museum, that things we put online and could end up being, on a Wikipedia page and linked as an official source. So it makes me think even more responsibly about what I might write, right? But I delved into her blog, which is wonderful to read, and she's a great writer. And I got an email a week or two later that was from her. And it said, I'm so thrilled that the museum, owns a portrait by Henry Taylor of me. Here's some more personal information that you might want to include about my biography and put on the Met's website. And I just love that gesture that here's someone, who has a biography of note that is not necessarily out there in all the ways we might see for many other famous people who deserve to be as famous as she should be, right? So I'm just wondering how one approaches that kind of situation in this lens of wiki editing.
Yeah,
I did go. Andrew, you want to go?
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I did miss part of it, but I think I got the gist. So, and everyone should chime in on this, but it's so important on Wiki and a good place to start for where you can cross list and red link her, right? So information about the diving program in general, information about, I don't know which branch of the military it was. Was it the Navy? Like that would be the logical one. The Army, but, so you go onto those pages first and see, like, is there something detailed about their deep diving program there? And what you can do is make sure that that area, even if she doesn't doesn't have a page or there isn't information about her, you can include her there, which basically indicates to the rest of us as Wikimedians, this is information that needs to be included and found. And it starts to build a kind of like, web of, okay, this is linked here and linked here and linked here. And it creates an opportunity for the information to kind of start to come to the surface. It would be amazing if there was a book about her or something that we just don't have in hand yet. But that's like always my first, this is an important person. Why isn't there more information, or how do I get them going? So you just start cross-listing them with other existing articles.
Yeah, I found that to be a useful tactic. I did a quick look at her, a couple weeks ago on Wikipedia, and one of the few Wikipedia articles she's mentioned is actually a historical novel where she was a consultant with the with the novelist to, because the novel was about an early a fictional early woman deep sea diver, and we can obviously she should be linked from that article, and also probably there are book interviews and book reviews that are going to mention her as well. So in addition to like the military sources and maybe sources related to her depiction in the painting at the Met, so you gotta cast a wide net and try to find where.
Right, that Jennifer Egan novel, that's so good, and I forgot that she consulted that's awesome. Okay, cool.
Yeah, and it's great to see.
Beach, it's called.
It's also good to see.
Go share.
It's also good to see what the artists were thinking about when they did the work. So, that's also good to include and know about. And it also gives perspective for lay people you know, like me wandering around, you know, looking at the work and say, oh, I want, you know, even though they say it belongs to the public when you put it out as an artist, it's always interesting for me to learn about what the intention was for some artists on the work. So that's also fascinating.
And it's just so great to see them reach out to you. This is not the first time we've heard of this. We've had a number of other edit-a-thons in the US, at least, where when the subjects of some of our edit-a-thons found out that we were interested in them, they sent materials to a museum or to some historical society simply because they knew we were looking for these things. And that's just great to see this keep going with that, with these edit-a-thons being a way to make a call for contributions, not just to Wikipedia, but for original source materials and for oral histories and things like that. So it's great to see. So we don't want to run over too much, but I thought if it's okay with Ian and Anna Matisse, you know the material better than I do, but I thought that the last 2 minutes of the virtual opening was really inspirational. So if we could play that, that might be a good way to play us out for the edit-a-thon. Does that make sense?
Great. I think that's Anna Matisse and my favorite part.
Oh, great. And we will also encourage everyone to keep editing. I know that, you know, a lot of the edit-a-thon today was not so much editing and instruction, but just finding the inspiration for doing it on your own. But you're not alone. As Sherry said, AfroCrowd is out there. Eliza said the Tea House is a great place for new editors to find support. So we encourage you to make this the start of something, not the end of anything, because there's so many things
as well.
I don't even know that I'll ever forget this experience or the people that I've worked with, the history that was made, the change that I think the Met wants and needs, that there might be even one Black child who sees this and it changes their life. And I want people to know that this exists for you. I want them to know their worth. And that's why this is so incredibly important.
Great. So thanks everyone for coming today. Jean, any last words of wisdom for folks?
No, please keep editing. Please make this information. We want to make this information accessible to the widest possible audience. So please keep editing. And thank you to everyone who's on the event today.
Great, thank you. And yes, thanks for all of our Wikimedia community and the Met staffers who took time out of their Saturday to join us for this. We really appreciate it. And it's been such a great time learning so much more about this this one room, and so much has packed into it. So congratulations on all the great work that you've done, and thank you for joining us. So keep on editing out there. You can go to the chat, as Richard has put up there, to keep the conversation going. We have a lot of folks who are from the Wikimedia New York and our greater US community that are interested in keeping the editing going. So thanks a lot, and we will hope to see you at another edit-a-thon soon. And stay tuned for more information on the next one that we'll be having. Thank you. Thanks all.